Welcome. Welcome to Mandalay's Forum's webinar on reimagining the future of business from Buddhist perspectives. I'm Thuta Aung. I'm the executive chairman of the forum and the Mandalay Forum for East Asian Studies. We focus on interaction between Asian economies, human development, entrepreneurship, and sustainability. We are a joint initiative between Myanmar Institute of Strategic and International Studies and Hamsat Consulting. At the forum, we are particularly interested in kinder and more sustainable ways of doing business. Hence, us organizing this webinar, bringing Buddhist elements in reimagining and hopefully co-creating the better, kinder world of business. Of course, we are all mindful that global supply chains and economies have been badly affected and in many parts disrupted. Of course, in a pandemic, it's natural and almost expected to be pessimistic. But then I can hear the words of the late Professor Clayton Christensen of Harvard that disruption is not necessarily bad. It can even be good for innovation. And the fundamentals of innovation require imagination and reimagination. And here we are to reimagine it. And the Mandalay Forum and I are fortunate to be able to be here with friends to co-create the future. I have Venerable Ashin Pannagavesaka, who is a Buddhist monk of Theravada tradition, and Dr. Karma Phuntsho, president of Loden Foundation from Bhutan, and my old friend, colleague, and who also taught me corporate social responsibility during my Danida Fellowship in Copenhagen, Elizabeth Boye, CEO of the Global River Center and Sociability. I think I will be doing a disservice to explain the rich backgrounds of my esteemed panelists, so I wouldn't even attempt it. They have such great backgrounds, and we are all enriched by your presence today. And first off, as we may have discussed before during our pre-launch session, both both Elizabeth and Shimpiana and myself, we are all intrigued by Bhutan. And in fact, me falling in love with Bhutan was during my time in Copenhagen. It's quite funny, the connection to Bhutan coming from Denmark, because during my time in Copenhagen, in my class, there were colleagues from Bhutan, and they were very calm. And from there, I got more intrigued about Bhutan, and I studied, I read more about it, and conceptually fell in love with the country. I have yet to visit Bhutan, and I'm of course very envious of the invention of the gross national happiness concept that Bhutan is aiming to achieve, which we can all aspire to. So the first question I would like to raise it to Dr. Karma. And for our audience from Myanmar, Dr. Karma, although Dr. Karma is from Bhutan, I can almost say he is almost Burmese. He's almost a Myanmar, because we call in Myanmar, we call affectionately our state councillor, our leader, a Mesup, or the mother of the union. And the late husband of Daw Aung San Suu Kyi, our state councillor, Professor Michael Aris, was the teacher to Dr. Karma. So that makes all of us connected. Our Myanmar Bhutan link through people we admire. So starting off with you, Dr. Karma, if you can reflect that we are all, we all miss our old normal. We all miss traveling. But at the same time, I'm sure we can all agree that the world wasn't that much of a great place pre-COVID-19. There was consumerism, and sometimes even ugly level of consumerism. And I believe if we can bring in the Buddhist perspective, there's greed, there's loba. to or almost extreme form of lobak greed there. And now, with the COVID, there's a disruption, and I wonder if you can provide a Buddhist and a Bhutanese perspective to addressing it, Dr. Kama. Over to you, Dr. Kama. Thank you.
So, hello, Kuzuzangpo from Thimphu, Bhutan. And yes, thank you very much for the invitation, Thuta. I bring you greetings from Bhutan and also much love and affection. As you said, I am like a Burmese citizen in a way. Even right now, I'm wrapped in something like a sarong. I've had a very close connection to to Mesu and her family during my time in the UK, and I still keep that connection going. I've never been to Myanmar myself, but I would someday love to be there. It's a great pleasure to take part in this forum organized by Mandalay Forum for East Asian Studies. And you mentioned about your connection to Bhutan being built when you were in Copenhagen. Bhutan also has a very good relationship with Denmark and quite a few small European countries, this roughly the same size as Bhutan. So yes, the COVID year, Bhutan has generally been spared of the ravages of COVID so far. We have had very good leadership. We have also our geographic isolation and a very strong sense of community, which has helped us see us through this difficult year. But we have had our share of problems in that we had a lockdown early in summer. And then again, there was a local transmission case here in the capital yesterday, the first local transmission in the capital so far. And so today is the first day of our second lockdown. And these lockdowns, for me personally, with a Buddhist monastic background, have been really fantastic times for reflection. And one of the reflections we really need to have is, at least something that I've been thinking about a lot this year, is being grateful and appreciative of what we have, the blessings we have in life, even looking at a flower and being so impressed and inspired by the color, the patterns, the texture, the fragrance, and also many other things in life which you can certainly derive a lot of joy from. And I think in this respect, the disruption we are seeing this time that we have been going through for over a year now has been a wonderful opportunity for humanity to really reflect and think very deeply about the trajectory we have to take in the future. I think we have, in the process of our development, in the process of what we call modernization here in our part of Asia, we have been carried away by the general sort of glamour of material growth, of economic development, of very comfortable, mechanized, industrialized life. But then this COVID tragedy has actually given us this wonderful opportunity to reflect on the real meaning in life, the real sort of deep purpose in life. And I think this is one lesson we can learn, that we can look at the process of development that we are seeking and see where we can improve. Now, you mentioned about the very materialistic growth that we have been seeking. I think it's true. In most parts of the world, the economic development has been driven by a very, very greed-centered, self-centric pursuit of wealth, irrespective of whether that wealth is actually contributing to your real happiness. Here in Bhutan, at least through some of our visionary leadership, we have managed to actually think about the overall goal of human development. And the gross national happiness that you mentioned earlier is something that Bhutan chose as the ultimate goal. It's not to say that Bhutan has already achieved gross national happiness already, but at least Bhutan has decided that if we are to seek a sustainable, meaningful goal for our development and human progress, it has been something that balances modernity and tradition, that balances material comfort with inner spiritual well-being. So that is the kind of vision that Bhutan has set, and most of the development projects are being implemented towards this kind of vision. So we hope that we will get there. And this year, I think, has been a real sort of a jolt for us to wake up and really pursue this more seriously. And I would like to come back to other issues later on, if there is an opportunity.
Thank you very much, Dr. Hama. I believe the takeaway point is that we should all be, we can all take advantage of this not so happy situation to reflect on how we can, how we can imagine or reimagine to a better place, and the process of development, and that requires further review. And with that point, I would like to raise a few points to Elizabeth, and of course, Elizabeth and I, we have known each other for quite some time, and thank you for tolerating me, Elizabeth. I mean, we have also worked together, and Elizabeth has also been my teacher on the issue of corporate social responsibility, and for my viewers as well. In case you have seen me having done good things in the world of CSR, it's very attributable to Elizabeth, and the awful things I may have done, Elizabeth is not involved in that. So,
thank you.
So Elizabeth, you are also a visiting academic at Copenhagen Business School, which is one of the best business schools globally. I won't say it's the best one globally, because I'm also doing research at Durham University Business School, which I will consider as one of the best as well, right? So they can't be the best. With the COVID and the new work environment that will emerge, the traditional post-MBA gigs may no longer be there. And the traditional work destinations that people will typically go to will either no longer be there, or it will be drastically different. Well, what's your take on that?
Yeah. Well, yeah, there are so many questions in what we raise, and maybe adding to also what you mentioned about me on my background. I've been engaged in work in Africa since '97, and very much about including marginalized group in business models, building skills for their enrichment, their own individual, but also making models that are more inclusive. That is maybe the common denominator for all what I've done, in being it in Asia, being it in Africa, and being very fortunate to work with you in Myanmar, of course, also was also about supporting, even if it was on more the monitoring side, inclusive or including value chains. And these value chains, just to make that as an example, were very much linked to that, what we can say, consensus that world should be globalized, and what that has entailed. I think that is very much questionable and being questioned these days. There is an attempt to say, well, can we then reimagine the globalization as we had it into a more digital globalization? And can we then just proceed with this GDP growth paradigm as we've seen, which I'm so curious about, the gross domestic happiness as one alternative, but the whole idea about that you cannot, well, you can disrupt, but that reflecting and looking inwards, both as an individual, but also as a nation, I think is extremely important. And in Africa, we see that we can actually use this as the chance to enhance, for instance, the inter-regional trade, and seeing how we can actually build our regions more strongly, make our friendship across borders more genuine, actually, and in mutual interest in support of individuals and groups and businesses and everyone, so to speak. In Africa, we have like an country trade of down to 13%. We in Denmark are trading, maybe our trade is, or 60% of our GDP is generated from trade with partners next to where we are, Germany and our Nordic partners and so forth. So what the reimagination of the globalization, if that should just be pursued in a new model, I am very much questioning that. I'm very much, of course, eager to see that this is an opportunity to include the majority into the economy, and not just favoring what was previously very much the greed-orientated, very ecocentric kind of wealth-creating ways of business models. And that is actually where I see the young people are picking up the interest. So that's what I actually believe is very much the future that we can actually build, because we have an interest in this from the youth, from the students, that we should not just look at the economic bottom line, but the social and the environmental is very, very, very much on their mind. They are choosing their career according to exactly, they are questioning the future goals that the typical MBA would do before. They are not taking a job in any business that are just into profit making or utilization of resources, even exploitation. So we are bound to, for many reasons, our future employees, our youth is dictating that we need to take into account the other aspects. So I don't know if I answered, but I hope I did to some degree. And that is what I'm supporting very eagerly in Global Business Center, Global River Center, of course, which is a hybrid of training, entertainment, enlightenment in community services and learning in the way that we would like actually these communities to take action on their own resources, enhancing circular economy much more, making sure that everyone can see themselves benefiting from the resources in the area, and rethinking the whole economics. And it's 200 centers that we are starting off with in Africa, bringing exactly your third question into action, and how can we actually enhance learning and doing that with business models, seeing how we can actually enhance income generating on the individual level based on collaboration, engagement, and businesses that are rooted locally and are inclusive. Yeah, I would love to come back to this. I can talk much more about it, but reimagining also the idea of globalization, I think, is the key word, and inclusive business models, and actually that regional trade, enhancing that one, coming back to our general problem, or I would say challenge from many of us, that we need to make an alternative to the Chinese investments that are taking over a lot of what we see. Even here in our part, we have Chinese investment, but Africa is so much dominated in the investment scene. If we can make strong regional brands, businesses that are inclusive, that are favorable to the youth, favorable to the resources in the region, they would be less dependent on the investment from China. I think that goes for every country that are facing this. We need to make strong alternatives to that wave. But yeah, that was a lot in one attempt to answer.
That's very good, Elizabeth. Thank you. So I'll be. I have noted things down. So you have shared so many nuggets of gold in areas of inclusiveness and people and young people already looking positively at the future and going beyond the typical profit-making route. It's no longer the only route, and the young people have recognized that, and the large-scale investments from foreign countries. So I'll be getting back to that, Elizabeth. And now, but picking from what you shared, Elizabeth, on more being open to the future, I'm sure there are still elements or parts of the society that are still stuck. There are the people who still refuse to change.
And holding on to what they have. Yes.
Yeah. Holding on to the pre-COVID pre-COVID conditions and thinking. And I have this belief in that this is almost evident in the language that we use, because and this time I'll address this to Phuntsho, to Ashin Pannagavesaka. They that we, in the language that we use, we use the new normal as if it's as a slightly different version or a constrained version of what was, right? So the previous incarnation, becoming a little more with the mask on, that's what some people would like to see as the new normal. And I think that's attachment to the past, and the Buddhist concept of the na, being attached to the past. So I wonder, Popo, whether you can give some light there. And for our audience, Ashin Pannagavesaka and Dr. Karma have the reverse similarity, as in the Dr. Karma had early monastic education and went into academia, whereas Ashin Pannagavesaka had a technocrat career and then later in life enter the religious order. So Pandit, over to you, if you can share your wisdom on the now and attachment to the past.
Thank you so very much for passing the floor over to me. Just as a preamble, I would like to list my shortcomings, so to speak. As Utuda so kindly said, I've been a technocrat, if that's the right word, and I was an architect for nearly 30 years, I would say, and I was mainly with the government. And so when Ututa approached me about this webinar, I had a lot of reservations, which I still do actually, because when I looked at the topic, said about business, that's possibly the last thing I know anything about. But anyway, because of my background, the way I think, always, once an architect, always an architect. So I think in terms of design, planning, and stuff like that. And now that I'm in monkhood, there have been a lot of changes, so to speak, in my outlook, and I'm still trying to come to grips with everything. And one of the things I noticed, I felt rather than noticed, about what's happening here due to COVID, is that a lot of the positive things have come up. They're sort of more apparent now in our country, at least. I can't compare it on a global scale. I haven't been out of the country for quite a long time, and I've been sort of cooped up in my little bubble in the monastery, and even to that extent, I've been more into meditation rather than the deep philosophy and the teachings in depth. And but what I've noticed was that in spite of the problems, the economic problems, and day in day out living conditions that have been impacted by this COVID thing, we still, Myanmar people here, we still have this thing about dana, giving, and that is still apparent in spite of the hardships and the problems we're having here, but what I find is that okay, because of this, some things have come up. And at the same time, I'm trying to figure out, like Dr. Kama mentioned just now, that it's given us time to reflect on the niceties in life. And that was very apparent to me because in the first lockdown, which was sometime in late March, April, we went out to the Shan states, to Yuanghe, and it was a whole different sort of atmosphere there. And like Dr. Kama said, you really learn to appreciate the environment and the niceties outside of the urban atmosphere. And I was wondering that after the COVID thing, why shouldn't we? Oh, okay, let's put it this way. I've noticed that the problems we're having here with COVID, every day there are these statistics coming out, and it's all centered in the urban areas. When I say urban areas, two particular urban areas. That's, of course, Yangon and Mandalay. And if we could decentralize this job opportunities and stuff like that. I don't know if I'm using the right terms or the right sort of. I don't know how I'm putting it, but it's the best way I can put it. And this is probably a good time to rethink it, to decentralize certain things. I mean, for instance, now this particular place, Yuanghe, it's it's a very small place when you compare it to the other parts of the Shan state. But now there's an industry there. It's growing gradually. Coffee especially, and it's a whole new thing now. Earlier on, the coffee industry was centralized in around Taungu and Mimio Piemule. But now it's growing there, and it's such a beautiful environment. So I was wondering if this is a good time to, like I said just now, I keep repeating myself, think about decentralizing stuff like that. And another thing that has come to my mind is just off the cuff thinking. 2 nights ago, I was thinking, now has COVID had sort of direct or indirect effect on? I don't like to talk about politics, but politics sort of has crept in slightly. Because of COVID, have we stopped this infighting, these ethnic things, the wars, the battles, or whatever that's going on around there? I suspect it's been toned down slightly, if not much, and maybe this is a good time to reflect on how we can coexist, how we can get on together without all this. This ego thing. It's mainly the ego thing, right? The political parties and the ethnic minorities and the majorities and all that. And if we can somehow come to terms with looking back on what COVID has sort of done, and maybe, you know, we can say it's all for the best. There's a good side and the bad side, the positive side and the negative side. For me, the positive side is, I think we need to sort of change, not exactly, maybe not change is not the right word, to change, okay, our mindset and think about more to do with compassion and empathy, because that's what we need right now. When I sort of reflect on how things are going now, in spite of the difficulties and the problems that we are facing right now, we are relatively quite peaceful, if that's the right word. Unlike what's happening in some other countries. For instance, I keep looking at watching news about what's happening in America and all. And to me, it all boils down to lack of compassion, lack of empathy, and this ego thing. It's still blown out of proportion there at a time like this, and it's a very sad thing. That would be the main thing that I would be thinking about right now. But how to link it with what's with business as such is something that I haven't been able to sort of make the relevant connections at the moment. Anyway,
don't worry. We will get there. We will get to the whole business connection part. But thank you. Something which our audience will notice from all three panel members, and especially Ashin Pannagavesaka and Dr. Kama, is the humility. Sometimes I've come across the misfortune of certain so-called, especially Western. Sorry, Elizabeth, but I know you're not like that. But there are certain people, there are certain folks, you know, who will fly into Bhutan, and then 3 days later they will brand themselves as a Bhutan expert. And Myanmar has more than 100 of them. And it's very, you know, remarkable that Ashin Pannagavesaka and Dr. Kama will never say, like, you know, I'm an expert. But which is why I feel myself personally, and from the Mandalay Forum, that we have friends like this. And Ashin Pannagavesaka has also touched upon certain aspects of changing our mindset, which clicks well with our reimagination, reimagining the future. And for that, I'd like to go back to Dr. Kama, and it's on, you know, in our quest to create a kinder world of business, a happier, a kinder, the world with metta. What should be the principles that underpin and guide the emergence of such a future? Yes. What should we change at the individual level and at institutional level, Dr. Kama, if you may comment? Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. So that's a wonderful question, and this is something very dear to me. I work as an academic for universities, but then some of my time I give to a charity called the Loden Foundation. And it's an educational charity, but because of the needs in the country here in Bhutan, we have also gone into entrepreneurship education for the last 13 years. So I've been working very closely with young entrepreneurs and startups. And I always passionately tell them that no, there is plenty of room for someone to be a very good Buddhist and a good entrepreneur or a business person. We often have this slightly distorted understanding of Buddhism as a very reclusive, renunciate, connected, meditative religion, shying away from the problems of the world. But when you look at the Buddha himself, I mean, the Buddha's first sermon was on the Four Noble Truths, which we all know, that there is suffering, suffering comes from causes, there's a cessation or a solution to the suffering, and there's a path to this suffering. So Four Noble Truths. How I put it when I talk to business persons and entrepreneurs or aspiring entrepreneurs is, I say this is Buddha's theory about management. He is a management guru. He basically is saying that life is full of problems, and these problems come from causes and conditions. But there is a solution to the problem, and that there are strategies, pathways to solve the problem. So it's a problem-solving strategy, the Four Noble Truths, a very pragmatic approach to life. So if you look at our problems in general, and also the COVID problem, I think what it really calls us to be is to find a solution to the problem. So if we approach the whole human situation or the existential situation with a problem-solving attitude, then we don't actually sort of go off the track. We become more effective. So using that sort of strategy, I often say, when you look at the mainstream business world right now, the problem is really about being driven by greed. Having no respect for nature, having no respect for other human beings. Those are the problems. Business as such is not the problem. I think there's plenty of ways in which you can be a very responsible, very socially, ethically upright business person. So here, when we train these young entrepreneurs, we always tell them how, first and foremost, they have to cultivate the inner resource of the mind. Just as the Buddha declared in the Dharmapada, everything is mind-made. The mind is the forerunner, mind is the chief. So first, cultivate that power of the mind within, not only in terms of cognitive abilities, of sharpness, of thinking differently, thinking innovatively, creatively, but also of the ethical, moral dimension of being compassionate, being conscientious. So have a very intelligent, but also a very ethical mind, you say, a compassionate, altruistic mind, if possible. So with that, if you get that mind in the right state, somehow things that you do later on will fall into place. Of course, as we know, there is this famous English saying that many roads to hell are paved by good intentions. But I normally say, it's only bad intentions that take us on that road. So intention is so important, I think, for our entrepreneurs, for our business world to really look at, to really look inward and see what kind of intention drives you. Is it tanha or trishna, the thirst for profit and personal benefit? Or is it something, is the intention to bring good for both oneself and others? So here, when we train our entrepreneurs, we have now trained over 5,000 young people. We've also funded 205 entrepreneurs so far by giving them soft loans. And we always tell them they have to have their intention right first. And then other things may fail, but if your intention is genuine, at least you have made the best effort. And Bhutanese generally believe that if the intention is good, all the paths and stages are good. So I think there is so much we have to learn in being mindful and reflecting inward to get our moral compass first. And once that is there, then what you also get, and to take it further from what Bhante shared about coexistence, I tell our young entrepreneurs here that their motto should be the Buddha's main philosophy, Pratitya Samutpada. He Dhamma, Hetu Prabhava. Things come out of cause, as I say. You have to chant that as your motto. And you know through that life is so interdependent, a nexus of cause and conditions, that we have to coexist, we are interdependent. And that would mean that our businesses or our activities must have a socially responsible approach, because our welfare relies on other people's welfare. Other people's welfare is really dependent on our welfare. So if we get these two right, the intention and this general worldview of interdependence and coexistence, I think a lot of the problems in the business world can be overcome, both in terms of how businesses exploit nature, how businesses exploit other human beings and animals, and also, more important, I think, is also to do more spiritual cultivation within. An entrepreneur or a business person can only have a more meaningful, more fulfilling life by developing the inner qualities as much as the business itself. So these are the kind of values I think Buddhism can definitely bring to the business world. Now, this has been already happening even before COVID, but the COVID situation has made it much more urgent. And there is a very strong, compelling case now to have these values integrated in the business world. And here in Bhutan, we often say we are trying to promote Buddhist entrepreneurship. And I even take it further and say we will promote Bodhisattva entrepreneurship to benefit both oneself and others, not just oneself. I leave it there.
Yeah, thank you very much, Dr. Kama. You know, I being a promoter of entrepreneurship as well, there are several things I would like to continue discussing with you and seek your opinion as well. And I think the world needs more of Buddhist entrepreneurship. And in the past as well, if you may have come across the book Small is Beautiful and the coining of the term Buddhist economics by E.F. Schumacher, who was actually an advisor to the government of Burma at the time, to Prime Minister U Nu. So these are all interesting things that the world definitely deserves. Elizabeth, you would like to comment? So you are muted, Elizabeth. If you can unmute yourself kindly.
Thank you. Sorry. And thank you very much for all this very, very insightful and inspirational inputs. I just wanted to say that I got eager to follow also this line of thinking that was brought out by Kama. Thank you very much. And to both of you, also to Panda and Thuta, of course, yourself. I'm so eager also to take it further, both further inside, but also further outside. And inside meaning, what is it that we need to address, which is I'm so concerned about. What does spiral, what does feed the greed? And I have arrived myself at very much this dilemma of it's very much a question of fear in our part of the world. Fear is fueling somehow a need for holding on to all your privileges and your safety and your, or at least perceived safety and wealth and so forth. But that idea of greed, to me, in my context and all what I've been exposed to and have exposed myself to, it really boils a lot down to fear versus love. And if we could stay in the state of the good intention, which is to me very much feeded by the love for everyone and the interconnectedness, I'm very much following that one. Also the idea of trust. What we have seen of this, if I manage to benefit at your expense, it's somehow if it can be fueled by mistrust and lack of kind of long-term relationships. If we really trust, we can build these long-term relationships in business, then we can build much more sustainable business, because it's not about the zero sum. It would be about winning both parties if it is a value chain or two people doing business together. So this idea about the greed, what does the greed really come from? And to me, it's very much about mistrust, and it's fear, and both, of course, are something that also could be, and that's maybe what I would like to take it to the higher level. How can we actually embed that in our policy making? How can we make an environment that is not fueling fear and fueling mistrust? We have in our part of the world built a lot of our whole political system, our business environment, our society as such on trust. It's deeply challenged these days because of, well, not only because of, but COVID has also exposed what such a situation does to politicians, that then get a beautiful opportunity to take on the power in use and misuse ways, so to speak, in very constructive but also very deconstructive way for our part of the world. It looks like that this idea of taking action and promote solution is so much in the Buddhism, as you mentioned, there is solutions to it. It's been very much about holding people into this grip of fear, because then you can control them, and that is promoted so heavily here. So we are taking a step backwards, unfortunately, in our society. So how can we somehow promote an environment of trust and love? It sounds maybe fluffy, even from my side, sitting where I am. In the policy levels, we have the guidelines from UN on business and human rights that is basically promoting care for each other. We should be considerate about the negative impact we may have of anyone that are impacted by our business. It's a very love-based, actually, sort of guideline, but how can we lift that up to policy level and make sure it's integrated in all our legal frameworks? It's done bit by bit what there is political support for, if it is on the child labor in one aspect or due diligence on the human rights in another. How can we globally promote that? How can we more, of course, looking inward in our individual mindset, starting to groom the love aspect, but how can we also make it even a part of the framework so that it is reinforced also when we do business? Maybe it's fluffy, but that's the thinking I promote.
No, I don't think it's fluffy at all, Elizabeth. I think they on the happiness index as well, Denmark ranks very high. So I guess the Scandinavians, although you have your no nonsense approach to life and in general, I think they are the Scandinavian governments have done it right in terms of certain aspects of social welfare. And there's that element of loving kindness, metta, that we call. There's an element of metta in the context of policy making already. Of course, there are always people who abuse it. There are benefit thieves in countries with welfare systems. So although there are abusers, the system still functions and the system still serves people who need to be served. Mm-hmm. And with that, I'd like to go back to Dr. Karma. So Dr. Karma, you may wish to respond to what Elizabeth have said, and maybe from our country's perspective. Bhutan is a bit, I guess Bhutan is a bit more successful in terms of having a more cohesive society. But like Ashin Pannagavesaka mentioned earlier, even in Myanmar, in the past, they were more bickering, but now with the COVID, there's even more kindness among each other. There's more peer-to-peer assistance. So there's a heightened social cohesion out of this pandemic. So can we sustain it beyond the pandemic? Can we, following on from Elizabeth, how can we sustain it? Can we integrate it into policy making, lawmaking? How do you think that can happen? There will always be certain people who will say, this is all fluffy stuff. Lawmaking is a serious business, nothing to do with metta and fluff. What do you think, Dr. Karma?
My first response is yes, policies are important, legal instruments are very important, but I think the real task should begin further down at the grassroots level. That governments all over the world have their vested interests. They are the ones who cause fear. They are the ones who often create this conflict and disharmony. So I think Bhutan's government, of course, is quite unique in that sense when you talk about gross national happiness and its sort of holistic approach to development. But I think in general, governments are always led by politicians who have to get their votes, who have to create some degree of fear to get their votes and so forth. So I would say that the more sustainable, realistic solution lies in the population, the citizenry. And that's why civil society, I think, is a very important channel for any kind of awareness. Public education is so critical. So I rely a lot on the education system, the public education channels, especially the media channels, and the civil society activities to really bring this awareness. And I think it is growing. We have to be optimistic. This awareness of, for instance, businesses having to be ethical and environment friendly. So for instance, the Loden Foundation gives loans to young entrepreneurs, but we have this strict condition that they have to fulfill 4 criteria. They have to be, of course, viable business, but then they have to also have social impact, either by import substitution or creation of jobs or moving people out of unhealthy livelihood. Then the business have to be environment friendly. And the business have to be culturally sensitive to wherever they are located, to respect the sensitivities of the locals. So we only fund projects that follow these 4 criteria. And through that, I think we create some degree of awareness among people. And I think when you have such ethical businesses, of course, sometimes their prices may be a little higher than the one that produces with very cheap labor, either young children or prisoners being used. They may also be extracting resources from nature irresponsibly, so be able to bring the prices down. Then our task is really to educate the consumers, to tell them that a little extra margin for a ethical business is worth the effort. So I think there's so much we need to do with regard to consumer education. Now, I'm generally not so much into slowing down the economy in our part of the world. I think when you look at countries like Denmark, they've almost hit the optimal material development that a human society can reach. So I think, Elizabeth, the countries in Northern America, Western Europe, some countries in Far East Asia also, they have already got that enough material comfort that they have to now think inward, look into inner fulfillment, and also look after the nature. But in our neighborhood here, Bhutan still has 8% of the population under poverty. I think Burma has far more. Myanmar's poverty rate, I think, is around 37 or somewhere there, very big. India has some 50 million people under poverty. So we're dealing with the economy that's only developing. And I think people need to work hard to sort of increase our productivity levels. A lot of our friends here are very complacent and lazy and not working enough. I think to bring the community up together, we have to put a lot more effort, but then put the effort in the right direction with the right sort of ethical and moral compass. I think.
I'm totally with you, Dr. Karma. And in fact, what I might even do is I'll put off my moderator hat and maybe also speak as a researcher in this field. In the Western world, there are conversations around concepts like degrowth, because growth on its own is not conducive. But it's all right for developed countries to say that. For developing countries like ours, I guess we should still progress. And that's why I'm also trying to I'm crafting a theory around the Mizima Paripada, the middle way to optimalization of optimalism, that there will be an optimal balance in the middle, that we can still grow, we can still achieve economic progress with no or minimum harm to environment and the people. So I still believe in growth. I'm not one of those folks who will advocate for degrowth at all. But I think we have to be critical. Yes, Elizabeth.
Thank you very much. This is one of my favorite topics, the degrowth, and I think you were the one actually putting me on this path about small is beautiful.
Yes.
Initially, yeah. So it's good, really good memories here. It's nice. But I think also a very important bit of what you're talking about, when we talk about growth, we consider growth as the way we usually measure it with GDP. Initially, GDP was actually never invented for measuring growth or measuring development. And you can have a positive GDP in a war zone, actually. So it's about maybe the way of measuring it, and that's where the Bhutan tool becomes very interesting also. So it's not that we are degrowth people, which I tend maybe to believe myself, be part of myself, but yet I'm not. I'm promoting the inclusiveness bit. So it's not about not generating economic returns. It's not about not starting out new activities and stuff. It's a way of doing it. It's the way of not thinking about only no harm. It's about thinking of obligations to create positive impact, measured in the sense. I think it's very interesting about what Karma was mentioning about the import substitution is a qualifying criteria for actually getting support as a business. And that comes back to this idea, can we groom our own economies, make them more strong with our neighbors and internally and so forth. I think that's a very, very interesting aspect of starting to actually coming back to that. Not to be interchanged with nationalism or anything, but actually to be creating and grooming safety as not being suddenly cut off in a global value chain because of things you're out of control of. But it's about promoting safety and in that way also trust, and then again have the opportunity and daring to promote the love aspects instead of the greed, because the greed is very much about I need to secure my future, and if I'm up to securing it in a world where I have 100 out of 99 factors that I cannot control, it's naturally maybe breeding that. So thank you very much for this. It was just about the way of measuring the growth. I think it's important. So I'll rather talk about development and promoting development, inclusiveness. Yeah.
Thank you, Elizabeth. So I'll get back to you about inclusive business, Elizabeth, because that's something which both you and I are very passionate about. But we actually have a question from the audience, and I'd like to pass on that to Ashin Pannagavesaka on creating the whole responsible business culture in Myanmar and post-COVID, reimagining the future. And us being a Buddhist country, would it be that simply adhering to our 5 precepts, the Navatila, would that be a good starting model, the good foundation blocks of socially responsible businesses?
Thank you for bringing it up, because that was one of the things that
You are crackling, Pamo. You will. Can you speak closer to the mic?
Is that okay? Is it okay now?
Better. Thank you.
Great. Yes, the 5 precepts. Those are the basics, and as Dr. Karma put it so well, so succinctly, is what Dr. Karma was talking about. He put it in a nutshell, actually, about the Noble Eightfold Path. And those 2 things are the foundation. Whether we're talking about business or ethics or morality or existence, or and I think Dr. Karma and Liz both mentioned the word pragmatic, which is what we need right now. Pragmatism. It has to be practical, and don't be dogmatic about it. And like I said just now, like Dr. Karma said just now, without mentioning it, he actually gave us all of the Noble Eightfold Path that we have to stick to, we have to think about, we have to consider. And it's not just to do with Buddhism. It's about us all, humanity. You can't deny it. Okay, so let's do it. Let's keep it. That's what I mean by the changing the mindset. We all have goodness in us. It's just a matter of degree. So how do we expand that degree? and and just now Utuda brought up about how we're going to do it, and Elizabeth also said, how are we going to do it? I think it has to be by example. And at the moment, right now, I think Bhutan and Scandinavia are very good examples. Okay, there are probably some sort of drawbacks, like anything in life, but I think they would be prime examples. And if we could promote that, we could disseminate all this. What's the history, the progress that you've made through the years, through time, and you could show it and say, okay, this is it. It's we can't do it overnight, that's for sure. Okay, but this is a good start. This is a good time. This is an eye-opening time. Even if you haven't thought about it, I think people have actually started to think about it. And it's just that how are we going to make them think seriously and put it into practice? And thank you very much for bringing up evoking some pleasant memories when you both mentioned Schumacher and Small is Beautiful. 40 years ago, when I was doing my postgraduate in Newcastle, it was housing for developing countries, and that was sort of like a Bible at that time anyway. And a lot of references in my thesis was Schumacher's Small is Beautiful. Thank you very much for evoking these memories. Anyway, but you know, it's a timeless thing.
I would actually like to raise another question, especially to all the panelists, because I've received a question, and that question actually, it is somewhat sensitive actually. And perhaps Elizabeth can start with the answer, and that's on the difference between responsible business and philanthropy, because some in a country like Myanmar, that is a very confused subject that people assume being ethical, being responsible, and equate that to philanthropic giving or donations or dana.
Yeah, yeah.
But sometimes it can be a bit obscene, as in you will have a pagoda in the middle of poor villages. The pagoda is very wealthy. The pagoda will have a lot of funds, but the villagers don't. So that kind of wealth difference that the pagoda present is almost, it doesn't look good. It's rather ugly. So if you can comment on philanthropy, and then how some of that philanthropic practice can lead to responsible business, that'll be good.
Thank you for that. It ties in with the whole history about responsible business also. If I may just go one half step back on that one, we started out, promoting globally the responsible business by the means of Global Compact. That was very much this idea about voluntary initiatives. Also the degree and also the nature was voluntary and just needed to report on what you were doing. And it made a lot of people, a lot of business people in countries like Myanmar, but across the world, who has a practice of philanthropic, having budgets for philanthropy and charitable purposes, actually a whole set of activities that were fueled by that business, funded by that business, in totally deconnected from the business itself. And that's why it's also not why, but it was part of making these examples of how that is not really much to do with responsible business, because it has, the only link was that the profit made in the business operations was channeled to charity. A lot of very good projects, a lot of also maybe changes made on the civil society level. but not really sustainable in the way that maybe even that society became dependent on that business charitable programs, meaning that they were very sensitive to this sponsorship and maybe started to act on different ways to get that and so forth. So it's not really building pride in dignity, or it was not decent. It's not the way of saying it. It can be very decent, it can be very good, but it's nothing to do with actually the business operation. So the difference is giving, and I think that's very much what we should come back to. Giving as a person is very much also about giving love. It's about giving respect. It's about giving because that's the right thing to do. And because we are connected and your loss is my loss, and think much more interconnected, that's then on a different level. On business level, responsible business is about having considerations into every aspect of your operations and how that is impacting the people, the stakeholders it is involving. That's basically the difference between the two, if I should be technical. Yeah, is that sufficient for now? Otherwise, I would love to. And it's taken further now in the UN Guiding Principles on Business and Human Rights, where you are actually obliged to have mapped out your entire business in the aspects of how it is impacting on the community that you're operating in. So and mitigating adverse impacts and so forth.
Okay, thank you, Elizabeth. No, that's really useful. I would now like to address this question to both Dr. Karma and to Ashin Pannagavesaka on this philanthropy. They, of course, you may wish to continue from what Elizabeth said, but the question I received also asks about the religious institutions, say like the famous Sri Dagon Pagoda in Yangon and Mahamudi Pagoda in Mandalay. These pagodas have bank accounts that are unbelievably large. Yeah. So the question was, wouldn't it be fair for these religious entities to share their wealth? Is it supposed to be allowed? Is it ethical? Is it right religiously? So, Dr. Karma, Phuntsho, whoever would like to go first.
Thank you, Thuta.
Yes, Dr. Karma, please go
Yes,
on.
sorry. So, yes, as a fellow Buddhist and somebody who is often here with some kind of spiritual activism, I would like to share my opinion on both the project, both the topics raised in the questions. I want to also talk a little bit on the 5 precepts. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you perfectly.
Okay, so I think while it is, yes, very, very important for Buddhists, and I tell this also for fellow Buddhists here in Bhutan, that we observe the 5 precepts, in our modern sort of 21st century economic situation, we need to be quite intelligent about understanding the 5 precepts. So for instance, the first precept of not to kill or not harm, in a consumerist society today, now we may not be going out there with a knife to kill a cow, but what we buy in the supermarket, that beef is indirectly being triggered by our beef consumption. In the same way, I think when we drink a bottle of water in a plastic PET bottle, the kind of negative consequences that plastic bottled water has on the climate, on environment, it's immense. So a lot of our actions are actually causing harm unwittingly on other people or other animals and the sentient beings and on the planet. So I think for Buddhists today, we need to be really very wise and conscientious about our consumption habits to make sure that our consumption habits aren't really causing harm or leading to taking life. And this is not so obvious, and most Buddhists don't really see it. So I think it's very important for us to be very, very mindful consumers. Second, on philanthropy. Now, this is also a problem here in Bhutan. Some people will have an outrageous, unethical business, and then they'll take a huge margin of the profit and go to a temple and make amends for it through a ritual or through dana. Now, most traditional Buddhists think that is enough. I think that is totally wrong. That if we have to look at proper Buddhist dana, that dana of income. So here, what we have been trying very hard is to really educate the public and tell them, now you have to have your source of revenue, your livelihood, correct, right? Otherwise, whatever amount of dana you give to the monasteries is not going to make amends for all the evil you did to get that dana. So it's a very important message that we have to convey, but then the religious philanthropy is so strong, so embedded in our society, it's very difficult to change people's mindset. In fact, there is, as one of the Tibetan lamas put it, there's a strong spiritual materialism. They believe they are making punya, making good karma by making these offerings. So there is a very, very strong materialistic attachment to such religious philanthropy. And what I've been trying to do is really at least educate people and say that the original message of the Buddha is not really about just doing religious philanthropy. You have to actually be good to the sentient beings who the Buddha cherished so much, that only if you help the sentient beings will the Buddha be pleased. The Buddha, a compassionate prince, will not be happy just because of building a huge statue of him. So I think there are quite a lot of such issues in our Buddhist population. Very deeply entrenched belief systems that are taking time to change. And hopefully we'll be able to change this mindset, make Buddhists more pragmatic, understand the original genuine message of the Buddha, and also hopefully divert some of this religious charity to social causes, to help poor people, to help hospitals, to help schools and so forth. So I hope that things are not as bad in Burma as here in Bhutan or the Himalayan countries. Here we have a very strong culture of doing rituals and making offerings to the priests and monasteries that actually amounts for such a huge percentage of people's giving. But a lot of these donations, as you pointed out, get stacked away to build even bigger temples, and they don't contribute to the overall development and improvement of the society. I see you.
I'm
okay.
Dr. Kaba.
Sorry, Ajahn would have something to say on this, I suppose.
Yeah, please continue. Please continue, Dr. Kaba.
I think you put it in words much better than I could ever have. And sorry to say that I think your mom may even be a little bit stronger on that side, not like you think. And even in, I think that's what I mean by mindset. I'm not sure what is the correct, what is the ideal mindset, but it's that's what I mean by we have to be the key word to me at least is metta and compassion. Without that, it's going to be we're going to go off track. Maybe we're going on parallel track, but not the track, and it's not going to be the middle way. And that is what it's all about. I think we have to make people realize it's going to take time. It's going to take a lot of time actually to make them realize that it is, you have to channel it in such a way that compassion comes before everything else, especially in this materialistic world. And for me at least, if we have this this little mindset about having compassion. I'm not talking about loving kindness. I'm talking about compassion, empathy. It's more to do with empathy, I think. And then maybe you can channel it to what onto the right way. And yes, it's a very I think it's a sorry thing. Even when people donate, this is something that's become very vivid during my last 15 years as a monk. Is when people donate, I wish they would donate. They would give their donations to more to those monasteries. I'm not talking about pagodas at the moment. To monasteries that are not well off at all, rather than to keep pushing it, keep donating to the more well, what they call glorious, I suppose, monasteries and institutions like that. There are so many places that are in dire need of requisites, and but a lot of it seems to be going into, it's like pouring water into the ocean, you know, it's giving it into the ocean, and I think that's also this mindset. Okay, well, when they do that, it's a lot. It's not. It's I don't know how to put it. They think that people think about, you know, okay, if I donate such and such to this pagoda, this glorious pagoda, and if I do that in my afterlife or on my way to Nibbana, it's going to be very rosy and things like that. But I think they sort of jumping across, you know, overlooking the fact that that dana, like Dr. Kama said, it has to be. I think the Buddha put it like that too. That the real dana is the person who is giving it. He really wants. He's really sincere about giving it, and the person who is receiving it needs it, and you are giving it to the right person, to the right whatever. So I think the people overlook that, and they say, okay, just giving to these big pagodas, to these the more famous ones would give them would make the dana more valuable, more worthwhile, and that mindset, I think, is still here and is going to be here for a long time, and I think that's where real philanthropy comes in. And if philanthropists actually promote the fact that they are giving to the real needy, I think that would be a very good example. And of course, it has to be with no strings attached, no political overtones, and you know, the what is the right word? No vested interests in it. The dana has to be clean, clear, and you're actually giving it because you're giving it to someone, somebody, some institution that really needs it, and you're giving it with no strings attached. So, and that I think a lot of people, a lot of that unconsciously, people this thing about giving to the more famous, the four more famous abbots, gurus, pagodas will somehow get them more merit, you know, which when you get down to it isn't it, and how do we set an example about that? You can't do it just by preaching, that's for sure. I've been trying to trying to get this thing across to a lot of people, but well, of course, I'm nobody, so no one really would listen to me.
Oh, you have struck it really well with your statement on people's general assumption that the bigger pagodas are the better, and perhaps with that bigger, more famous, I guess that the notion of the bigger part, I will draw that to Elizabeth. Because you are in the whole space of promoting investment as well, Elizabeth. We are both Bhutan and Myanmar being developing countries. We need investment, and even developed countries like Denmark work tirelessly in attracting investment, inward investment, especially from foreign countries. So with the kind of future that we are creating, the kinder, better world to do business type of world that we all want to go create. What kind of investments should we be careful about? Because we all have certain investments that we like, and these are the good ones are easier to imagine, but the ones that are somewhat tricky, we need to be a bit more mindful. So, what's your take on that, Elizabeth?
Sensitive question, thank you. But of course, it depends on if I respond from the Danish perspective and how we would look at investments here, knowing that our legal framework, our assessment, our due diligence systems are intact and taking to at least a very large degree into considerations that ethics are compliant, or we are making sure that these investments are in compliance with a certain set of ethics. It's much different when I work, for instance, in Africa, that we are doing right now a lot, actually promoting investments there. My prime investor in Global River Center is Bamfa Group, and it's a Nordic venture capital, Nordic Africa venture capital company, very much having the whole profile of how we invest, having the ethics at the forefront, not as a filter or a grid that you then assess according to and then you invest, but actually the whole mindset. And that is, I would like to hope that we would set an example as Panda was mentioning, that's go by example. We actually have a motto in working with this investor. I have my motto is investing for impact, and their motto is impact by action, meaning that we actually go and do it, show that we actually take into consideration that if this investment is taking much or to the degree possible into account the resources locally and how that can be boosted, how that can be strengthened. Least, of course, the return on the investment on the investors in the Nordics, but they are also very, very keen in seeing the impact along with what we are making of money. So we are actually making sure that our investments are promoting both positive impact, not only no harm, but positive impact, and not only in terms of business related jobs, but decent jobs that are enlightening, jobs that are making people strive, jobs that are enhancing the quality of life where they are created, and that is very much what I would like to say, that we would like to see others following our example. We have a few investments, less than 10 now, but we're getting close to 10 now. Some here and most in Africa, and we would like to promote this way of doing business, that we give equal weight both in how we promote the investments and how we invite investors in, that they should be people with the mindset that they give equal weight to the impact as well as the return on the investment. And that can be, there are various strategies to assure that. And I think it's hard also to make an assessment on the mindset initially. But if we have that as our requirement, it naturally actually attracts people with that mindset. So we hope it's a mutually reinforcing way of promoting responsible investment. Yeah.
That's very useful, Elizabeth. I particularly like this, trying to do it by design and not hoping that things will fall into place, because sometimes that hope can be dangerous, and that hope can actually lead to misunderstandings and disagreements between the investor and the investment receiving country. So it's that positive by design is really
maybe just one, and that is what we, by the whole wave, we're seeing that so many investors are now taking on this label, we are impact investors, but not really changing much about their practice and or modus operandi in the whole process. Maybe they just put a filter, ESG, and then that's basically just supporting a business as usual. So I would very much like to maybe raise a flag then and be cautious about what's behind that filter, and what's behind that label, impact investment. There needs to be genuine.
All the nice labels around the impact investments, etc. But you know, try to get deeper into it, because not everyone, they may be using the same terms, but there might be different meanings behind each investor that actually uses these fancy terms. So with that, I guess the communication part, Bhutan has particularly been successful in communicating the GNH and the attracting the right kind of investments. And Bhutan is rather clear on what kind of investments the country wants. So what's your experience, Dr. Karma? Has successful communication, yes, the actual conclusion of investment deals, how's it going? And by the way, this will be the last question, Dr. Karma, and to the audience. So after that, Dr. Karma, what we will do is we will collect statements from each of you, and then we will have to close. I'm all fully aware of the time. So investment success, Dr. Karma.
Yeah, thank you, Thuta. So yes, Bhutan has been successful in setting an overall goal for the development. And that goal, gross national happiness, has been also to a large extent put down in systematic processes and also implemented and tried. So there is a GNH screening tool for most of the development programs that the government runs to check whether it is GNH friendly or not. And now we also have a GNH certification for businesses, although I don't think Bhutanese businesses have been ranked or assessed based on this new GNH system. FDI, now Bhutan, as you know, is actually quite impoverished in terms of domestic revenue for investment. So we seek a lot of external investment for especially capital funding of huge infrastructures. And I've been serving on the economic task force team this year. So we have been very ardently finding ways to raise FDI. Now, in the past, Bhutan has been quite cautious. So certainly even today, investments with vested political interests, we may have to be very careful about them. But the areas where Bhutan got more investment was in sort of green economy. So we have had a lot of investment from India in the hydro sector. It's the biggest sector at the moment in terms of the size of the revenue. Then we have also had quite a lot of foreign investments in hotel and agriculture. What we have been shying away from would be investments in mining, in logging of forest, and also to do something that's quite immoral, like creating Bhutan as a tax haven or some kind of unhealthy tourist destination. So yeah, Bhutan has been very cautious about having irresponsible investors, exploitative ones. But then we are, these days, especially with COVID, the economy has really gone into the negative in terms of GDP growth. So we're very earnestly looking for foreign investors. And the areas where Bhutan would really welcome investment would be in the spiritual, cultural sector and the environmental or agricultural sector. Those would be the high sort of priority list where I think foreign investors would be generally very welcome. I want to, if this is the last sort of chance I'll get to share, because today's topic is about reimagining our economic process, I want to actually end on a positive note. Now, one thing that, or two things rather, that I find very promising recent developments is among the young people, the millennials and those after that, there's a new sense of awareness and perhaps a lesser sense of greed, greater awareness of equity and environment. So I think that kind of trend is something we need to really promote. It has happened in developed countries like the US and Western Europe. I think in our part of the world, in Myanmar and in Bhutan, we need to also groom our young people to think in the same way, in a very responsible, sustainable manner. So that's one. The second thing that's also sort of trending now is a sharing economy. Now, instead of the traditional hotel systems with these big chains sometimes, now we have Airbnb, where people can swap homes. Now, we have these resources built anyway. Now, I remember living in the UK, and sometimes during holiday season at night, only a few houses on a whole street would be lit, meaning most of the people have gone on holiday somewhere else. So all those accommodations are being left sort of unused. So now when you have such resource underuse, and at the same time we are accumulating more and more, it's such a wonderful idea to share. I think Airbnb is a wonderful thing. Similarly, we have Uber, sharing cars. Why buy cars all the time? I think we can share what we already have. Music, films. I think there is this new, thanks to digital revolution, we have this new sharing economy culture, which I think we should promote. And that way, we will have as prosperous a life we want with the existing sort of resources without having to produce and get more and more. So I think those are sort of optimistic things happening. And I would say for especially our Burmese, Myanmar Buddhist friends, one thing at least I really strongly think about is, we have talked about dana, we have talked about the 5 precepts, but one thing in Buddhism we have is virya, that wholesome enthusiasm, virya, to do things. I think we have to promote that wholesome enterprise, or otherwise our countries will remain stuck in this sort of poor economic situation. And only with that kind of positive enthusiasm to do things, not only for oneself, but for the whole society, for the whole country, for the whole world, then we may be able to make a difference. So on that note of enterprise, wholesome enterprise, I will end here. Thank you very much for inviting me.
Yeah, thank you very much, Dr. Kama. Phamphong, so some of your words of wisdom for our audience as a closing remark.
I'm not sure about the wisdom.
Well, I think, sorry.
But I so agree with Dr. Kama, especially about his concluding remarks. And one fear I have linked with what Dr. Kama mentioned just now is it's all about greed, I think, because tourism, the the benefits, so to speak, the lucrativeness from tourism is is taking over too much of our environment, and how do we come to terms with that? But I think that's a lot to do with legislation and policy matters actually. But if the people, if those in the policymakers and the lawmakers, if they could be made uh, to be more aware of the precepts and the Noble Eightfold Path and all, I think they might just be able to rethink their policies and law and legislative things, which is if after the COVID, I think there's going to be a big boom here, I'm sure, because it was already in the making, and then I think for better or for worse, it's sort of taken it's been halted for a while, but once COVID is sort of relatively out of the way, I think that is one fear I have, and concerning business. But for my concluding remarks, for whatever little they might be worth, is the main thing I think is the mindset, and we need to have more compassion, and the attitudes have to change, and this Jnana Metta thing. If we are going to be going on a global thing with globalization and all, I think this Kalyana Metta is very important, and not only for us, for on a global scale, for everyone actually, and hopefully the leaders and the policymakers, not only in our country, elsewhere, are slowly coming to realize that, and with that wish, I would like to conclude my contribution, my humble and small contribution to this, and I'm so glad to meet Dr. Kama and Elizabeth, and I hope to receive a lot more, not some, a lot more from you in terms of knowledge and how your countries have been making progress, and well, both the good and the bad, all of it. And I'm really very interested. I like to travel, and it's all come to a stop, and hopefully before the end of my days, at least, I'll be able to visit Bhutan and Denmark and all of Scandinavia.
Yeah,
Thank you all for your patience.
Elizabeth, so some of your parting words of wisdom. Perhaps maybe since I can somewhat make certain demands of you. Perhaps if you can focus on the future part and maybe a little bit on leadership, because we actually had a last minute question on leadership. So if we can close on that, that'll be nice. Yeah. Before I make a summary.
Thanks a lot. Thank you very much. And it would be my honor to host you all in Denmark. So please don't hesitate. The moment we can make that happen, please. Yeah, thank you. And thank you, Thuta, for giving me a chance to say a few last words. I think my point would have been that we need to build on exactly that positive, as Kama was also mentioning, that, and I mentioned earlier myself also, this positive change that we see among our millennials or our youth, and their indignation, their compassion, actually, their understanding that resources are closer to them, and harming resources is harming themselves. and their critical choices of who they would like to work with and who they would like to engage with, and so forth, is a very, very positive movement that I very much would like to reinforce. My own mission is to engage the African youth in a very short distance future. It is half of all young people below the age of 30 that would be on the African continent. So it's a major resource for positive development that we can groom there. So making them understand that they can have a positive impact on their own life, talking about leadership, evoking personal leadership, not only discipline. I know discipline is very much a part of this also, but understanding that you can actually lead by example, creating a better life for yourself in a positive way, in a positive impact model way. It is my mission. And I think that I would leave in that, and building 200 centers in Africa, building maybe as many across Asia, but also in the Nordics. We would like to actually create a community, a global community of that positive movement among the youth. And we're already linked up with the high schools here and university students, because we would actually like to make that global movement, which is very much about compassion, of course, but it's very much about responsible business and business principles, circular economy, which is very much about sharing also. So that is maybe my mission, what I would like to. And we believe that if we can do that, we can get that critical mass of young people. We are actually also in the position to inform policy and be a critical sounding board for evoking it into the way of running a country even. And we would like to believe that is supporting from the bottom line. So actually, yes, leadership is very much about believing in the young people, making them the future leaders. And leadership in a responsible business manner is about what we have been hearing from our other honorable speakers. It's about your personal integrity in the first place. It's about understanding that the world is interconnected, and respect of each other, and respect of resources, compassion, yeah, all of that. So that would just be a repetition. Thank you very much. Thank you for allowing me to participate. Thanks.
Thank you, Elizabeth. I can't express my thanks enough to our panel speakers. I'm also grateful to our listeners and supporters of the Mandalay Forum. At the Mandalay Forum, what we believe is the right answers, getting to the right answers, the right solutions. There's something more important before, and that's to ask the right questions, because the right questions only the right questions can lead to the right answers, and sometimes not ask. So even if those questions are uncomfortable to ask, it's best to ask them. And the summary that I would like to make is from our Phuntsho, from Bande, the importance of Kalyana Metta, which is friendship amongst nations, friendship among institutions and individuals, and to build it and to treasure it and to capitalize on that friendship. And I believe this session today is a perfect example of Kalyana Metta, because we have Myanmar, we have Bhutan, and we have Denmark, right? So this is, I believe, although, you know, from our own individual efforts, we managed to do something global today. And from our Dr. Kama, that's something really touched my heart, and that's on energy management of the youth. And sometimes, you know, people complain about the youth being so troublesome, so rebellious, and I believe that there's energy, and sometimes excess energy, and it needs to be managed and directed in a positive way, and not complain about the energetic youth. And that's very insightful, Dr. Kama. And the emergence of the sharing economy, and where we should all play a role. And you have also pointed something golden, Dr. Kama, and that's on the Waria, the enthusiastic, positive effort. You know, we should all be more. We should all have more effort. Waria Bushibulu. So for that Waria, I believe we. With that, we got to Elizabeth, and that's on the importance of leadership, and how we can still make good among nations through acts of responsible business. And there are and I believe a session like today can lead to future questions and future webinars. And what we hope is between and especially from Elizabeth, because of your work in Africa and between Myanmar and Bhutan and some of your friends from African nations, we can even have South-South cooperation in action. I believe today there's already a Myanmar-Bhutan collaboration, and with you from a non-South country. But there's more that can be done in the future, and please consider this as a first step. And I feel very confident and fortunate that with the support of you, we can say that we can successfully conclude for today. Thank you very much.